The violent buzz of my phone ripped through the quiet of midnight, sharp and jarring, like a gunshot in a dead room. It pulled me out of that hazy half-sleep I'd been stuck in for hours, lying there waiting for Clara to call and say she'd made it home safely from her bachelorette weekend in Whitefish. As I grabbed the phone, its cold blue light washing over my face, my gut tightened with a feeling I couldn't explain yet, but one that was about to prove terrifyingly accurate. Just 3 weeks before our wedding, after 3 solid years of building what I believed was a rock-steady future together, everything I thought I knew about love and trust was seconds away from falling apart in one life-ending moment. It was a Facebook alert. Olivia Grant, Clara's loud, reckless college roommate, had tagged her in a post less than half an hour earlier. My thumb froze over the screen before I finally tapped it, knowing deep down I was pulling a trigger I couldn't unpull. The photo loaded slowly, like it wanted to hurt me piece by piece. There was my fiancée, Clara Whitman, the golden daughter of Raven Creek banker Victor Whitman, sitting far too close on some stranger's lap inside the Timberwolf lounge. Her blonde hair spilled over her shoulder as she laughed, relaxed and careless. One hand rested confidently on his chest, while his fingers traced far too high along her thigh, claiming space that had never belonged to him. The caption underneath said it all: last night of freedom, followed by #NoRegrets and #WildNight. Friends had already liked it, each one another silent witness to my humiliation. I let out a long, slow breath, the kind I'd learned during combat breathing drills back when I served 6 years in the military. I'd come back to Raven Creek, Montana to start a construction business and somehow ended up falling in love with the woman now smiling at another man on my phone. I stayed seated in our dark bedroom, the same room we'd painted together the previous spring, while talking about where we'd put a crib someday. Training kicked in, forcing down the rage boiling in my chest. Instead of calling or texting her, I took a screenshot, saved it, and then did something I'd never normally do, especially as someone who barely existed online. I posted the picture to my own page with a short caption: "Wedding's off. Freedom has a price." I shut my phone down and poured a drink to calm my nerves. The bottle was supposed to be opened on our wedding day. Drinking it now felt appropriate, like a toast at the funeral of what we'd planned. The microwave clock glowed 2:28 a.m. when I sat at the kitchen table. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The darkness felt right, like it belonged there, covering the death of trust. For more than 3 hours, I sipped that bourbon slowly, letting reality sink into my bones. I replayed every late night at work, every unexplained weekend trip, every subtle change in how she touched me or didn't over the past few months. The signs had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. At 5:43 a.m., the front door slammed open. Her keys rattled into the ceramic bowl by the door, the one her mother gave us when we moved in together 2 years earlier. Her heels clicked unevenly across the hardwood as she stumbled inside. "Ethan, why are you sitting in the dark like some psycho?" she muttered. "And what the hell did you post?" She sounded intoxicated and defensive as she reached for the light. When the overhead light snapped on, she squinted. Mascara was smeared beneath her eyes, her hair a mess. She was still wearing the tight black dress from the photo, now wrinkled and tired. I didn't say a word. I simply turned my laptop toward her, the image filling the screen, the timestamp glowing clearly in the corner. 1:47 a.m. Not earlier in the night. Not something innocent she could brush off. Less than 4 hours ago. "Are you seriously doing this right now?" she laughed nervously, dropping her clutch on the counter and dragging a hand through her tangled hair. "That's just Adam. He's the bartender. I was drunk. It was a stupid picture. You've embarrassed me in front of everyone with that post." I leaned forward, noticing how inappropriately close he was to her. "Bartenders in Montana usually touch customers like that?" I asked quietly, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. "And they usually wear Rolex Submariners and custom-tailored suits while mixing drinks," I added. "That watch alone costs 20 grand, Clara. I build houses. I notice details." Her face flushed deep red, alcohol and guilt bleeding together as her story started to crack. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "It was my bachelorette party. Everyone was having fun. Why are you tracking me like some controlling freak?" "I wasn't tracking anything," I said evenly. Your friend Olivia posted it for the entire world. I closed the laptop gently, the soft click sounding final. Who is he? No more lies. Nobody, she rushed out. Just some guy at the bar. We were dancing and drinking and. Her phone lit up inside her purse. She glanced down and quickly declined the call, panic flashing across her face. Your father calling at 5:45 in the morning? I asked calmly. That's unusual. Victor Whitman never called before his precisely scheduled 9 a.m. check-in. Clara once told me he believed early calls were for desperate, disorganized people. The phone rang again. Her hands were shaking now, the polished world she lived in starting to crumble. He probably saw your stupid post, she said, voice tight. You've humiliated me in front of the entire town. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to my reputation? My family's reputation? I repeated quietly. You think I embarrassed you? I pushed myself up from the kitchen table, rising to my full 6'2" and looking down at the woman I'd fully expected to spend the rest of my life with. Answer your father, Clara. She turned her back to me and pressed the phone to her ear. Daddy, I can explain. No, it's nothing like that. Ethan is blowing this way out of proportion. No, please don't come over. Even from across the room, I could hear Victor Whitman's voice booming through the phone, sharp and authoritative, the sound of a man who spent his life issuing orders and expecting immediate obedience. Less than 20 minutes later, a sleek black Mercedes rolled into our driveway, and the situation exploded into something far bigger than I'd anticipated. Victor Whitman didn't knock. He stormed straight inside, still imposing and solid despite being well into his 60s. His silver hair was perfectly styled, as if this were a board meeting instead of a pre-dawn crisis. What the hell is going on? He demanded. Clara, grab your things. You're coming home with me. Mr. Whitman, I said, keeping my voice controlled but firm, your daughter was photographed in a very compromising situation with another man just a few hours ago. I think some honest explanations are owed before anyone leaves. I don't know what you think you saw, Hayes, he snapped, but Clara tells me this is a misunderstanding that you've blown completely out of proportion. His eyes were cold and assessing, the same look I imagined he gave people asking for loans they had no business requesting. Remove that defamatory post immediately, he added. If you don't, my attorneys will be in touch by noon. Clara hovered slightly behind him now, the fire she'd shown earlier gone, replaced with something between relief and anxiety. She wouldn't look at me. The truth isn't slander, Mr. Whitman, I said, reopening the laptop and turning the screen toward him. This was taken just before 2 in the morning. I pointed to the timestamp. Then to the man's hand gripping his daughter's thigh. Clara didn't come home until almost 6. So where was she for those 4 hours? And who is he? Victor barely glanced at the image. My daughter does not owe you a minute-by-minute explanation of her whereabouts, he said coldly. And this possessive behavior is exactly why it's best this engagement ends now. Daddy, please, Clara cut in, her voice suddenly smaller than I'd ever heard it. Can we just go? Something in her tone made both of us turn toward her. There was fear in her eyes, but it wasn't fear of me. Clara, I said softly, just tell the truth. Who is he? For a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Regret, maybe. Or the fading outline of the woman I thought I knew. Then Victor's hand settled firmly on her shoulder. Her expression hardened instantly. Ethan, you're turning a stupid photo into a full-blown investigation because you're insecure and controlling, she snapped. I'm done explaining myself. This is over. She slid the 2-carat diamond ring from her finger and set it on the counter. The quiet clink echoed through the room. I'll send someone to pick up my things later. A few minutes later, they were gone. Gravel sprayed as the Mercedes backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the road. I stood in the doorway, watching the taillights vanish into the distance, feeling like something fundamental in the universe had shifted. The future I'd mapped out. The life I'd believed in. All of it erased in a single night. I shut the door and looked around the house, suddenly hyper-aware of Clara's presence everywhere. Her reading chair by the window. Her photography books lined neatly on the shelf. Her favorite coffee mug still drying in the rack. Only then did the weight of it all finally hit. My legs gave out, and I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor as the first pale streaks of dawn crept through the windows of what was now just my house. Later that morning, a soft knock came at the door. Mrs. Carlton from next door stood there holding an apple pie, concern etched into her face. At 83, she'd been widowed for over a decade and had unofficially appointed herself the historian and watchdog of our street. Nothing ever escaped her notice. "I thought you might need something warm," she said gently, her sharp gray eyes taking in my unshaven face and wrinkled clothes. "That girl never deserved you, Ethan." I invited her in for coffee, mostly out of habit. My head was pounding from bourbon and no sleep, but she'd known my parents long before they retired to Arizona, and I'd been raised to show respect. "You know," she said casually, stirring sugar into her mug as she settled at the kitchen table, "I walk my dog at strange hours. Insomnia is a curse of getting old. Your mind wants rest, but your body refuses." I nodded, not yet understanding where she was headed. "4 months now," she continued, "I've noticed Clara's car parked over at Riverside Heights late at night. Usually when you were out of town on those construction jobs in Billings." She paused, watching me carefully over the rim of her cup. At first, I thought maybe she was visiting a friend. But it kept happening. Always late. Always when you were gone. I set my mug down slowly, the sound of ceramic on wood far louder than it should have been. "Riverside Heights?" I asked. "You're sure it was her car?" "The white Audi A4, I added quietly, with the Montana Wildlife Fund bumper sticker and that small dent on the passenger side from when she hit the mailbox last winter." Mrs. Carlton reached across the table and patted my hand. "Yes, dear. I may be old, but I'm not blind. I debated telling you for weeks," she said softly. "But I've seen what secrets do to good people. Truth hurts, but lies destroy." After she left, I sat alone staring at my phone for a long time. Finally, I called Owen Blake. We'd been roommates at Montana State before I enlisted. He'd dropped out to help his father run the family bar, and now he owned the watering hole, Raven Creek's most popular place to drink. If anyone in Raven Creek had their finger on the pulse of local gossip, it was Owen. He showed up less than half an hour later, worry written all over a face that was usually full of jokes. "That picture's everywhere, man," he said the moment I opened the door. "Clara's friends are telling anyone who'll listen that you're controlling and paranoid. They're even saying you've been off ever since you got back from overseas." A familiar flash of anger sparked in my chest at the unspoken suggestion that my time in the military had somehow damaged me, made me unstable. It was the excuse people leaned on when the truth was too uncomfortable to face. I shoved the feeling down and stayed focused. "Do you recognize the guy she's with?" I turned the laptop toward him, the photo enlarged. Owen bent closer, squinting. Then his eyes widened and he let out a slow whistle. "Yeah. That's Leo Carmichael. He's a regional manager at Mountain State Insurance, the same company Clara works for." Everything suddenly snapped into place in a way that made my stomach turn. Over the last 6 months, Clara had been staying late more often. There'd been more work trips, more client dinners, more industry events that conveniently ran late into the night. I'd never questioned any of it. I trusted her completely. "Is he married?" I asked, already knowing what Owen was going to say. "Wife and 2 kids," he replied. "Big place on Lakeside Drive. His oldest just started at Raven Creek Elementary." He studied my face, concern deepening the lines around his eyes. "What are you thinking, Jack?" I wasn't thinking. I was feeling something colder and more precise than anger, something I hadn't felt since my last deployment. "I need to know how long this has been going on," I said. "I need to know if my entire relationship was a lie." Owen rested a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You sure you want to go digging? Maybe it's better to walk away, count it as a bullet dodged, and move on." I would, I said, closing the laptop, if it were just personal. But they're dragging my name through town, painting me as unstable. That hits my business, my reputation, my whole life here. Owen let out a slow breath, recognizing the resolve in my voice. All right. What do you need? Just keep your eyes and ears open, I said. I've got another call to make. The next day, I reached out to Felix Hart. We'd served together in the Army Rangers. After getting out, he'd started a private security firm in Missoula that specialized in corporate investigations and digital forensics. I laid everything out for him, not bothering to hide the anger or the humiliation. I need the truth, Felix, I said. How long it's been happening, how serious it is, and whether they planned all of this. This isn't exactly healthy, Jack, he replied, though I could already hear him typing, keys clicking in that familiar rhythm. Felix never could resist a challenge, especially one involving lies. You sure you don't want to walk away? He added. Montana's a big state. Plenty of mountains, rivers, and women who aren't engaged in organized betrayal. I need to know, I said again. For my own sanity. He went quiet for a moment. All right. Give me a few days. And try not to do anything stupid. 3 days later, an encrypted file landed in my inbox. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, a glass of bourbon untouched beside me, as I went through the documents one by one. Hotel receipts going back 8 months. Credit card statements for dinners in places Clara had never mentioned. A flight booking to Chicago under both their names scheduled for the month after our wedding, when I was supposed to be on a beach in Hawaii with my wife. The worst of it was the text messages. I didn't ask Felix how he got them. I didn't want to know. Reading them made my stomach churn and something inside me go permanently hard. Clara, he has no idea. Clara, sometimes I feel bad, but then I think about how boring my life would be stuck in that town with him forever. Leo, just a few more weeks. Once the promotion goes through, we're Chicago bound. Leo, fresh start. Like we planned. Clara, what about your wife? Is she suspicious? Leo, meeting with a lawyer next week. The kids will adjust. They always do. Clara, what if Ethan finds out before the wedding? Leo, he won't. The guy builds houses. He's not exactly a detective. There were hundreds of messages like that, plans, promises, intimate details that cut deeper than any blade. And running through all of them was one clear theme. I was the obstacle. The inconvenience. The fool they used as cover while they built their real life together. I read every word, letting it reshape something inside me. Then I made a decision, one that would change more than just my own future. Leo Carmichael lived in a wide ranch-style house with a manicured lawn and a basketball hoop over the driveway. I parked my work truck across the street, blending in like every other contractor vehicle in town, and waited. At 6:15 p.m., a silver BMW pulled in. Leo stepped out wearing a tailored suit and carrying a leather briefcase, the picture of a man climbing the corporate ladder. I waited until he was inside before walking up and knocking. When he opened the door, the confident smile fell from his face instantly. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying and failing to sound in control. I could see it in his eyes. He knew exactly who I was. "I'm Ethan Hayes," I said. "Clara Whitman, fiancé. We need to talk." He glanced back into the house, then stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "Look, I don't want any trouble," he said quickly. "Neither do I," I replied, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "That's why I brought this." I held up a flash drive. "Everything's on here," I continued. "Hotel receipts. Text messages. Your Chicago plans." I met his eyes. "I'm pretty sure your wife and Mountain State's HR department would find it very interesting." The color drained from his face until he looked like he might pass out. "What do you want?" he asked. "Money? Is this blackmail?" The question was so offensive it almost made me laugh. "I want you to end it with Clara," I said evenly. "Today." Right now. Before I walk across the street and introduce myself to your neighbors as the man you're cheating with. He stared at me, his expression shifting from panic to something closer to pity, mixed with contempt. You really don't understand, do you? He said. She doesn't want you. She hasn't for a long time. We've been planning this for months. That's her choice, I replied, but she'll make it honestly. Not while keeping me around as a backup plan in case your promotion falls through. Leo leaned back against the porch railing, a smug smile creeping onto his face. And if I don't? He asked. You'll expose yourself as a fool? Go ahead. By next month we'll be in Chicago. You'll be old news. Something in his arrogance snapped the last bit of restraint I had left. I shared the information with the appropriate people at the company. You're right, I said quietly. It's not my choice to make. Then I hit send. Leo's phone vibrated in his pocket. Then again. And again. He pulled it out with shaking hands, his face draining of what little color remained as the notifications flooded in. What did you do? He whispered. The smugness was gone. I shared the truth, I said. Isn't that what insurance is about? Protecting people from unexpected disasters? The front door opened behind him. A petite brunette woman stepped out, her face pale, her phone clenched in her trembling hand. Leo, she said, voice breaking. What is this? Who is Clara Whitman? Why are there hotel receipts on your credit card? I nodded politely. Mrs. Carmichael, I'm truly sorry you found out this way. Then I turned and walked back to my truck, leaving Leo to deal with the consequences he'd earned. The fallout came fast. By that evening, Clara was calling nonstop. I didn't answer. Her father left voicemail after voicemail, threatening lawsuits and screaming about defamation, each message sounding more frantic than the last. Owen called to update me. Leo had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation for having a relationship with a subordinate. His wife had thrown his clothes onto the front lawn in a display straight out of a country song. Around midnight, Clara showed up at my door. Her eyes were swollen and red, her makeup gone. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual perfectly planned outfit. It was the most undone I'd ever seen her aside from the morning after the bachelorette party. How could you do this to me? She demanded the moment I opened the door. You destroyed everything. I didn't do anything to you, Clara, I said calmly. I just told the truth, something you couldn't seem to manage. It wasn't what you think, she insisted. Leo and we had a connection. Something real. Something I never felt with. She stopped herself, but the meaning hung heavy between us. Don't, I said, raising my hand. I was surprised by how steady I felt. Don't rewrite history to make yourself feel better. You made choices. These are the consequences. Everyone is talking about me, she said desperately. My father is furious. The company is investigating me for an inappropriate relationship with my boss. They might fire me, Ethan. My life is falling apart. I looked at her and realized, for the first time, that I didn't recognize the person standing in front of me. The woman I loved had been a polished exterior hiding someone else entirely. You should have thought about that before you planned to leave me at the altar and run off with a married man, I said. Her expression shifted, pain giving way to calculation. I'll tell everyone you hacked my phone, she snapped. That you fabricated evidence. That you're unstable from your time in the military. That you threatened me. Go ahead, I replied, exhausted. The truth has a way of surfacing. Ask Leo how that's working out for him. She did exactly that. Within days, a small circle of her friends began spreading rumors about my supposed violent obsession and PTSD episodes. They claimed I'd fabricated everything out of jealousy and rage. Two of them were especially loud, Nathan Cross and Colin Price. Nathan owned the local pharmacy and had known me casually before Clara. Colin worked at an accounting firm and had dated her briefly back in high school. Neither had ever liked me much, but now they were actively trying to destroy my reputation in a town where reputation was everything. Then Felix called. "I dug into the friends who are trashing you," he said. "I discovered some people in town might not have been fully honest with their business dealings. I sent you the proof." "I didn't ask you to look into them," I said. "No," Felix replied. "But friends watch each other's backs. Those guys are throwing stones from glass houses." I sat with that information for a full day, turning it over in my head. Then I made another decision. The Raven Creek Summer Festival was the biggest event of the year. Everyone showed up for the Saturday night community dinner in the town square, followed by music and dancing under the open sky. I'd helped build the stage 2 years in a row. This time, I arrived early and asked to speak with Mayor Harrison. He'd known me since I was a kid building backyard forts, and he'd been a close friend of my father's. He reviewed what I showed him and nodded grimly. "You'll have 5 minutes before the band starts," he said. "Make them count." By 8 o'clock, the town square was packed. I spotted Clara sitting with her father at one of the tables near the front of the square. Leo was nowhere in sight. Word around town was that he'd skipped out after his wife filed for divorce and his company fired him following a short internal investigation. When Mayor Harrison called my name, the crowd went quiet. Everyone in Raven Creek knew about the canceled wedding and the rumors that had been swirling ever since. Some faces held sympathy, others curiosity. A few Clara's friends clustered tightly around her looked openly hostile. "I'll keep this short," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying easily across the square. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ethan Hayes." I paused. Until recently, I was engaged to Clara Whitman. I saw her jaw tighten as her father pulled her closer, shooting me a glare full of pure hatred. "There's been a lot of talk about why that wedding didn't happen," I continued. "Stories about my mental health. Claims that I made things up out of jealousy or some kind of PTSD episode." I let my eyes sweep the crowd. Near the back, Nathan Cross and Colin Price stood with beers in their hands, smirking like they already had the upper hand. "I'm not here to attack anyone or drag personal business into the open," I said. "I'm here because truth still matters in this town. When I was growing up here," I added, "a handshake meant something. Your word mattered." I held up the flash drive. "Everything I've said is documented right here. The months-long affair. The plans to leave town the day after our wedding. Hotel receipts. Text messages where I'm openly mocked as the fool who had no idea." Clara was shaking her head now, mouthing no again and again. "And to those spreading lies about me," I continued calmly, "especially Nathan Cross and Colin Price," I saw both men stiffen, "you may want to rethink that. Your own secrets involving illegal prescription sales and embezzlement won't stay hidden forever." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Mayor Harrison stepped closer, ready to intervene, but I was already finishing. "I've lived in Raven Creek my entire life, except for my years of military service. I've worked hard, treated people fairly, and tried to live honestly. All I'm asking is the same courtesy in return. Judge me on facts, not rumors. That's all." As I stepped down from the stage, the crowd parted without a word. Some people nodded at me. Others avoided my eyes. Clara was gone from her chair, but her father still sat there, his face locked in cold fury. I was halfway across the square when I heard fast footsteps behind me. I turned just in time to see Leo Carmichael rush me, his face twisted with rage. Apparently, he hadn't left town after all. "You ruined my life," he yelled, swinging wildly. I stepped aside easily. His form was sloppy, just as careless as his choices. When he lunged again, I used his momentum and flipped him onto his back. He hit the pavement hard, the air blasting out of his lungs. "Your choices ruined your life," I said quietly, standing over him. "I just made sure people knew about them." 2 police officers rushed in and pulled him to his feet. Chief Donovan gave me a look. "You want to press charges, Jack?" I shook my head. "Not worth it." What followed was more cleansing than I expected. Nathan Cross shut down his pharmacy and left town before the state board could act on an anonymous tip about prescription irregularities. Colin Price was placed on leave after an audit uncovered nearly $80,000 in missing funds. Clara's father pulled strings to land her a job in Seattle, far from the stares and whispers of Raven Creek. As for me, I sold the house and most of what I owned. I handed the construction business over to my foreman, Lucas, who'd been running much of it anyway while my life unraveled. 3 months after the wedding that never happened, I loaded what remained into my truck and prepared to leave town. Mrs. Carlton came over to say goodbye, pressing a blueberry pie into my hands and dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Colorado, to start," I said. "My cousin's expanding his construction company in Boulder. After that, who knows?" She patted my arm, pride and sadness mixed in her gaze. "Some men would have been destroyed by what you went through," she said. "You stood tall." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "When life tries to break you," I said, "you either shatter or you come back stronger." "You'll write to an old woman now and then?" she asked softly. "I promise." I kissed her papery cheek and climbed into my truck. On my way out of town, I passed the landmarks of my life with Clara. Riverside Heights. Her old office. The church where we were supposed to be married, its white steeple glowing in the morning sun. Each place felt less painful than I'd expected, more like turning the final pages of a book I'd finally finished. At the town limits, I pulled over and took out my phone. I'd shut down most of my social media weeks ago, but I had one last thing to post. When life breaks what you thought was unbreakable, thank it. From the pieces, you build something stronger. Something truer. The road ahead is wide open. I put the truck in drive and headed east toward the mountains. The sun crested the peaks, painting the sky in deep reds and golds. Max, my German shepherd, adopted after I came home from overseas, stuck his head out the window, ears flapping in the wind. He'd stayed with Owen during the worst of it, and now he looked just as ready for a fresh start as I was. New day. New beginning. What was meant to destroy me had finally set me free. About 8 weeks after I left Raven Creek, my phone rang with a call I wasn't expecting. It was Owen. "Jack, you need to watch your back," he said without any small talk. He told me Victor Whitman had been asking people around town if anyone knew where I'd gone. The moment I heard that, a cold weight settled low in my gut. I asked what Victor could possibly want, even though I already knew the answer wouldn't be good. According to Owen, Victor had lost a major investor after the scandal with Clara blew up. He was blaming me for all of it. Worse, Owen said Victor had been drinking a lot and running his mouth, making vague but ugly threats. I thanked Owen for the heads up and ended the call, pushing the warning aside as best I could. To me, Victor Whitman was all noise, just another small-town banker who'd spent his life throwing his name and title around to scare people. I honestly didn't think he had it in him to do anything real. 3 days later, I found out just how wrong I was. I was working late at a construction site, wrapping up some electrical work in the basement of a mountainside house. The crew had packed up hours earlier, leaving me alone with nothing but portable work lights throwing long, uneven shadows across the unfinished concrete walls. Then I heard footsteps above me. I froze, listening. "Hello?" I called out. "Anybody there?" I figured maybe the foreman had come back for something he forgot. No one answered. The footsteps kept going, slow, steady, intentional. I set my tools down and climbed the stairs carefully. The main floor was almost completely dark, lit only by the glow spilling up from the basement behind me. Someone stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, their back to me, outlined against the faint light from outside and the silhouette of the mountains. "We need to talk, Hayes." The voice belonged to Victor Whitman, but it didn't sound like the polished banker I remembered. This version was rough, edged with something dangerous. I kept my tone steady as my eyes swept the room, instinctively looking for anything I could use if things turned ugly. "How did you find me, Mr. Whitman?" I asked. "Money finds things," he said flatly. "If you're willing to spend enough of it." He turned toward me, and that's then I saw he had a gun. It was clear and unmistakable. You destroyed my daughter's life, he said. Your daughter destroyed her own life, I answered evenly, and took mine down with it. He let out a laugh, sharp and humorless. Always the righteous one, huh? The wounded hero. Do you have any idea what your little truth crusade cost my family? My reputation? I took a slow breath. Put the gun down, Mr. Whitman. This doesn't fix anything. Instead, he pointed it toward me, his hand shaking, and I could smell the whiskey from across the room. You humiliated her, he snapped. In front of the entire town. You turned her into a joke. She lost her job, he went on, his voice breaking with anger. Her future. Everything. She was planning to leave me at the altar and run off with a married man, I said, stepping carefully to the side and putting the kitchen island between us. What was I supposed to do? Thank her for it? You had no right, he roared, the gun wobbling. You should have handled it privately. Like a man of honor. Honor? My own anger flared despite myself. Was it honorable to lie to me for months? To plan a wedding while arranging to abandon me the day after? His face twisted with fury. You think you're better than us? You're nothing but a grunt who builds houses. My daughter deserved better than you from the beginning. Then she should have been honest about that, I shot back. Instead of saying yes when I asked her to marry me. I tensed, ready to move if his finger tightened. Is this really how you want it to end, Mr. Whitman? You shoot me and spend the rest of your life in prison? How does that help Clara? Something shifted in his expression. A crack of doubt, maybe the first hint of reason cutting through the alcohol and rage. She cries every night, he said quietly. My little girl cries herself to sleep. His voice sounded smaller now, worn down. Do you know what that does to a father? I'm sorry she's hurting, I said, keeping my distance. But this isn't the answer. We stood there for a long, unbearable moment. Then, inch by inch, he lowered the gun. She loved you once, he muttered. Before that bastard Carmichael filled her head with promises. He suddenly looked old, beaten. I should have seen it. I should have stopped it. We both missed the signs, I said. I didn't move closer yet. My eyes stayed on the weapon. Victor stared down at the revolver like he'd just realized it was in his hand. I wasn't really going to shoot you, he admitted. I don't know what I wanted. You wanted to protect your daughter, I said. I get that. I stepped forward slowly. But this isn't the way. Give me the gun. He handed it over without a fight, then collapsed onto one of the bar stools, burying his face in his hands. Everything's falling apart, he said. The bank board's pushing me out. My wife says this is my fault, says I didn't raise Clara right. It all feels like ashes. I popped the cylinder and felt a strange wave of relief. There was only one bullet inside. Not a murder plan, something else entirely. I pocketed the round and set the gun on a high shelf. Go home, Mr. Whitman. Get help. For Clara's sake, if nothing else. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. Why aren't you angry? You should want to kill me. I've carried enough anger for one lifetime, I said. I'm trying to put it down, not add more. I walked him out to his rental car, made sure he called a hotel shuttle, and took his keys. As the shuttle drove off, a strange sense of finality settled over me. The Whitman family was no longer part of my life. Just characters from a chapter that was finally closed. 4 months later, an envelope showed up at my job. No return address, just my name, written in handwriting I recognized immediately. I almost tossed it without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a 4-page letter from Clara. Ethan, it began. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, and you'd be right to throw this away. She wrote that she needed to say some things, even if I never answered. Leo had left her. After everything, after losing her job, her reputation, and burning every bridge she had for him, he'd decided to reconcile with his wife for the sake of their kids. She even acknowledged the irony. "I've been in therapy, trying to figure out why I did what I did to you. The easy explanation is that I was selfish and scared. The harder truth is uglier. I was terrified of turning into my mother, stuck in a small town, married to a man whose dreams never stretched past the county line. That fear doesn't excuse anything. It's just the sad reality I've had to face. I'm not writing to ask you to forgive me, and I'm not trying to reopen anything between us. Doing that would be an insult to the kind of man you are. I'm writing because my therapist says making amends matters when it's possible, and because you deserve to hear me say this out loud. Everything that happened was my fault. Not yours. You were a good man, Ethan. Honest, steady, and real in ways I couldn't see or value at the time. I think about the life we could have had, the simple, decent happiness I threw away, and it still haunts me. I hope you found peace. I hope you're building something new. And I hope that one day, hearing my name doesn't hurt anymore. With regret and remorse. Clara. I folded the letter neatly and slid it back into the envelope. Once, words like that would have ripped open wounds that were barely closed. Now they felt distant, like a message washed ashore from someone I'd known in another life. I never replied. Some stories don't need an extra page. 6 months later, I stood on the framing of a mountainside house just outside Boulder, looking out over snow-dusted peaks stretching across the horizon. My phone buzzed with a text from Owen back in Raven Creek. "Thought you'd want to know. Clara's back in town. Seattle didn't work out. Sounds like she's living with her parents again." I smiled faintly, surprised by how little I felt. Just a dull, distant pity for the woman who'd once been the center of my world. I texted back. "Thanks for the update. Hope things are good with you and Mia." I slipped my phone into my pocket just as my site supervisor called up to me. "Jack, there's someone here asking for you." I climbed down the ladder and saw a woman waiting near the construction trailer. She was tall and athletic, dark hair pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail. Her green eyes were sharp and direct, sizing me up without pretense. "Mr. Hayes," she said, offering her hand. "I'm Sophie Lang. I own the property next door." She explained she wanted to discuss a few design changes before things went too far. We shook hands, her grip firm and confident. "Call me Jack," I said. "And I'm sure we can figure something out." As we walked the property line, talking through drainage and sightlines, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. The easy comfort of honest conversation. No hidden motives. No games. No betrayal lurking under the surface. The first anniversary of the wedding that never happened found me in a place I hadn't expected to be. My work with my cousin's construction company had grown into a full partnership. I'd bought a small cabin outside Boulder, with a mountain view that still caught my breath every morning. Max had a fenced yard to guard, and I had started seeing Sophie Lang, the neighbor who'd first shown up to talk about design tweaks nearly 6 months earlier. Life had found a rhythm again. A purpose. The scars were still there, but they didn't ache every time I moved. Then the phone rang. "Jack, it's Owen," he said. "I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Clara's in Boulder now. She took a job with an insurance office there." My stomach tightened. "How does she even know I'm here?" "Small world, man," he said. "Her cousin works in real estate. Apparently saw your name on some permit paperwork." I thanked Owen and ended the call, staring out at the mountains like they might offer advice. Boulder wasn't Raven Creek, but it wasn't a giant city either. Running into Clara was suddenly a real possibility, and one I wasn't sure I was ready for. Almost on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Ethan, it's Clara. I know you're in Boulder. I think we should talk. Clear the air properly. I'll be at the Weatherford Cafe on Pine Street tomorrow at noon. Please come." That night over dinner, I showed the message to Sophie. Her response caught me off guard. "You should go," she said gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Not for her, for you. Close that door for good." I thought I already had. Sophie smiled at me, her green eyes soft but sharp at the same time. If that were really true, she said, a single text message wouldn't have shaken you like this. She wasn't wrong. The next day, right at noon, I pushed open the door to the Weatherford Cafe. I let my eyes sweep the room until I saw her sitting alone at a corner table. Clara looked different. Thinner. Her blonde hair was cut short now, framing her face instead of flowing the way it used to. The polished, perfectly put together version of her was gone, replaced by something quieter, more restrained. When she noticed me, she straightened, a complicated rush of emotions flashing across her face. For just a second, my mind jumped back to the first time I'd ever seen her 5 summers ago at a friend's backyard barbecue, when I'd been absolutely certain she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else. Ethan, she said as I sat down across from her. Thank you for coming. What do you want, Clara? I asked. My voice wasn't angry. Just worn out. I wanted to apologize in person, she said. And to make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I replied. Actually, better than fine. She nodded, looking down at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. I'm glad. I really mean that. Then why are you here in Boulder? I asked. There are insurance companies all over the country. She met my eyes for the first time. I'm not following you, if that's what you're thinking. I needed a fresh start. Somewhere with mountains. My therapist says I have to face my mistakes instead of running from them. And I'm one of those mistakes? I asked. The biggest one, she said quietly. She slid a folder across the table toward me. My father tried to come after you. I didn't know until recently. I found this in his office. Inside were photos, my job site, my cabin, even one of me and Sophie walking her dog on a trail near town. Jesus, I muttered, a cold shiver running through me as I remembered Victor Whitman standing in that dark house, holding a revolver. He's in treatment now, Clara said. Alcoholism. Depression. But I wanted you to know. To be careful. He isn't well. I closed the folder. Thank you for warning me. She took a breath, steadying herself. And I wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly sorry, Ethan. Not just for what I did, but for who I was. Selfish. Entitled. Blind to what actually mattered. I studied her face, half expecting the familiar signs of manipulation or calculation. But I didn't see them. All I saw was raw, uncomfortable honesty. I forgive you, Clara, I said at last, surprising myself with how certain it felt. Not for you. For me. I don't want to carry that weight anymore. Tears filled her eyes. I don't deserve that. Probably not, I said. But forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. I stood up. I wish you well. I really do. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Outside, the Colorado sun was bright, the mountains standing tall against a flawless blue sky. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter, as if the last thin threads tying me to my past had finally snapped. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Everything okay? I smiled and typed back. Better than okay. I'll tell you everything tonight. Then I headed for my truck, ready to keep building the life that had grown out of the wreckage. A life that, somehow, felt more honest and more real than the one I'd lost. Later that evening, I sat on the deck of my rented cabin with Max stretched out beside me, watching the sunset wash the mountains in gold and deep red. I thought about the twisted road that had brought me here. The humiliation and pain that once felt unbearable had led me somewhere peaceful, somewhere I might never have reached otherwise. The betrayal had cracked me open, but in doing that, it freed me from a life that would have slowly suffocated me. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you saves you from something far worse, a lifetime spent living a lie. I lifted my beer in a quiet toast. To the mountains. To truth, no matter how much it hurts. To new beginnings, no matter how unexpected. and to the long, open road ahead. If you like this story, hit the hype button. This video deserves to be seen. Have a great rest of your day.